All right, I'm Steve James, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel. I'm a longtime filmmaker with Kartemquin. It began with Hoop Dreams, and as recently as City So Real was a Kartemquin project, and been just making documentaries with Kartemquin over these many decades. Rubin?
I'm Rubin Daniels. I'm an editor. I was an intern at Kartemquin, and then from there I started working with Steve James on America to Me and then City So Real, and been editing ever since.
Hi, I'm Bing Liu. I was part of the 2014 Diverse Voices Documentary Fellowship and worked with Steve, Kevin, and Ruben on America to Me. And Steve was gracious enough to EP my film Minding the Gap that went through David.
Hello, my name is Ashley OShea. I was a 2015 intern at Kartemquin and then began developing my film Unapologetic through the Diverse Voices in Docs program, and eventually became a co-production. Worked on it with Ruben, even though he didn't mention it. Yeah, I can see.
My bad.
I just had to jab you real quick. But yeah, director producer Unapologetic, which went through many programs before landing at co-production.
I know he's proud of the work he did on it. I can speak firsthand.
I'm just messing with him.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely.
I'm Kevin Shaw. I was a 2018 Divid Fellow with my project Let the Little Light Shine. First worked with Kartemquin on America to Me with Steve and Bing and Ruben, and have also worked on City So Real with Steve as well.
My name is Jenny Shi. I was a Diverse Voices in Documentary Program Fellow in 2018 with my film Finding Ying, and I continued working with Kartemquin on my film, and it eventually became a Kartemquin co-production.
My name is Reveca Torres, and I was part of the Diverse Voices in Doc program in 2017, and also the Hulu Kartemquin Accelerator program in 2020.
Great. Again, great to have all you guys on. Maybe we can start with I don't know. Let's just dive right into, we're in a real moment in our field. And across all the arts, really, but we're just here to talk about documentary, I think. What has struck you about this moment as it relates to the work you've either done with Kartemquin or the work that maybe you might be doing with Kartemquin in the future? What stands out for you as significant about that for this organization? Anybody dive in?
I would just say it's probably it is a moment of reckoning for institutions and organizations to really, I would say, put their money where their mouth is in regards to the idea of challenging and really examining who's telling stories, particularly in communities of color, and whether white filmmakers should be the voice to do that depending on what the story is. And if not, those filmmakers should be thinking about basically kind of ceding power and supporting other filmmakers of color who might be closer to the communities that they're trying to tell the story on, and can have an organic richness that maybe the white filmmakers are not going to necessarily have in regards to whatever the story is. So, I think this is a real charged moment for people to really come to grips with some of these issues, and really start to consider who owns the power, who has the power in that dynamic, and when should that power be ceded to other filmmakers, particularly filmmakers of color, and how can they be supported so that they can end up telling these stories that are happening within our communities.
That's great. Other thoughts on that one from anybody?
I think just to touch off what Kevin said, America to Me was a good example of that. We all worked on that together, and the fact that it's based in Steve's community of Oak Park, but still you went out and made sure this camera person was Bing or Kevin or Rebecca, like that it was a diverse group of people going out there to get the story and shooting the story and interacting with the kids. And then on the editing side, me editing, Leslie editing, David editing. So it was a bunch of us really had our own input into the story, and it wasn't like just all coming from one white man, so.
That's certainly true.
If I can just piggyback on that, it's not even just about being the camera persons for that project. Bing, Rebecca, and I were directors on that project as well, regardless of however the DGA decided to give us a credit. So there was like storytelling power given to us on that project through Steve, and we all did collaborate together. But the stories that Bing followed were stories that he directed. Same with Rebecca, and same with myself. And so that is the one thing that I think a lot of people don't recognize when they talk about trying to bring people of color onto productions or whatever. It's about they don't want to see that some of that storytelling power. It's more than just being the cinematographer on a project. We're making storytelling decisions. We are developing the relationships with the participants, and we're telling the story the way that we see it. And that is the key there, and the thing that made America to Me, and that whole dynamic different. And that's not what I'm seeing a lot just yet from other institutions or filmmakers that are trying to incorporate filmmakers of color into productions.
Again, I just touch on that real quick again, that also on the editing side, I don't remember how far we were in, but I saw an interview for one of our characters, Jada, and I told Steve, we should start following her right away. And, I'm fresh out of grad school. I don't know what I'm talking about. He could have easily just been like, Rubin, shut up. We're going to do this, but he actually listened. And, they made a focus to start following her, and she ended up being like a key central character. So I think stuff like that is not only like having the people there, but actually listening and taking what they're saying and, and using it and implementing it in production. So.
Well, so Ashley, let me ask you, what made you feel equipped to tell the story of Unapologetic that I know that, Rubin was your editor on? What made you feel equipped to tell that story?
I think that was a developing, I think, readiness to tell that story. But I think a big part of it was the fact that I was following two other young Black women that were going through this experience of like navigating the movement for Black lives, but they were also going through the experience of figuring out the direction of their lives. And I was very much so in the same place, like starting this project while I was in the Kartemquin internship program. And so for me, I think it just was a matter of asking a lot of questions, like on all sides of things. So like understanding the comfort level of both of my subjects, as well as figuring out like what tools I had at my disposal to be able to start tell the story. But like, I didn't really have much in the beginning. I just had access to friends that had cameras or to Northwestern or whatever it was. So that's really why I had to kind of create this process as it was moving along with programs like Kartemquin. And so as I started to go through each of those different kind of levels, as I did David, and then eventually became a co-production, I felt like I just was constantly asking questions, because I don't know if I like felt fully equipped in the beginning. I just felt like I had a relationship to the story and to the movement, and had always been an advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement. But I felt like because I had that solid foundation, I guess, that even though I wasn't fully equipped on the production side of things, that it would hopefully balance out as I was like going through production.
Yeah, one of the things when I first saw Unapologetic, I saw a cut of it at some point that you guys shared with me. One of the things I remember talking to Rubin about was that, there is a level of intimacy that comes through in the storytelling there between you and the two women, that no matter how skilled another filmmaker who couldn't connect in that way, the way you did with them, is, I don't know that it would have had the same intimacy and the same sort of level of fundamental trust, even though trust is, can be gained. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me. And it stood out for me oddly enough, or maybe not oddly enough, but it stood out for me in the more, not even in the activist moments, but in the moments where they were more reflective about their own sex lives, or when they were together at a party and celebrating. That's where it really shone through in a way that, like, for example, someone like me, I don't know that I would have ever gotten to that, no matter how hard I try.
I often say that I want Unapologetic to feel like a Black woman made it. And I think in addition to that, working with like Rubin and other like emerging Black creatives is really important as well, because there was just so much to the story of the movement, and to these heavy issues of policing and brutality, that we almost needed that collective understanding to be able to get to the point of storytelling, like to the depth of storytelling that we wanted to go. And I just feel like if I would have had to navigate that in a majority white space, or even a non-Black space, that it would have taken a lot more time than it did working with other young Black creatives.
Jenny, do you want to jump in on this with your film?
Yeah, sure. So I started finding Ying when I was still in school in 2017. And right after I graduated, I started my fellowship at Kartemquin Films in the Diverse Voices in Documentary program. And throughout the whole process, I would say, like, for me as a documentary filmmaker and a video journalist, I always want to approach the subject more in a personal way. And I understand that, like, big news outlets, sometimes they would do like the production very efficiently. So probably they approach the subjects officially, and they set up certain shoots and get the shot they need. But I think in my story, because it's about a family, a Chinese family who knew nothing about US, and they were navigating, the strange country here, and also trying to find their missing daughter. So on a personal level, I feel like, there's a certain intimacy in the film. And also as a filmmaker, I really wanted to be careful about like the power dynamic. Even though I'm Chinese, I share the same cultural and history background with the family. I'm still very careful about my interaction with the family. And I think at a certain point, I was asking myself, whether I should continue pursuing this story, because it's so sad. And also I think there are a lot of like ethical questions I need to answer. But on the other hand, I just feel like, the media representation on Chinese in the US and also Chinese American, not enough. And I feel like if I can really, take on this project and to really help a general audience to understand who we are, who a Chinese international student is, that would be really helpful. And in terms of like throughout the making of the film, I don't know, I wouldn't really say that I feel I'm fully equipped when I first started the project. I feel like I was basically learning throughout the whole process. And in terms of the team, like I'm the director, cinematographer, and the producer, and I have a friend who's also a Chinese student in the US, and he's also the cinematographer. So basically it was like two of us filming with the family. And we have Diane, who is Chinese American, working as a producer. And we also have a white producer who's Brent Huffman. He was my professor when I was at Northwestern. And we actually had a white editor, John Fabrother. He's really talented. And I think at first, when we were thinking about how we are going to putting together the team, we did think about maybe we should just have a team of like people of color. That was our initial thought. But later on, I just feel like it's necessary to have a collaboration, because for my film, Finding This Story, we had some challenge to make it relatable to a broader American audience. So having a white American working as an editor actually give us a lot of different perspectives, because at the end of the day, I don't want people to see this is just a Chinese story. I want people to see it as a story that can be relatable to everyone. It's going to be like a universal story. So I think, it's necessary, to have certain collaboration between people of color and white filmmakers. Yeah, that's my experience on Finding Ying.
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes me think about you being on both America to Me and in Minding the Gap. There are no Asian subjects that you are following. In America to Me, you did not follow Shanti's story. Reveca did. You followed stories of African Americans, Black people in America to Me, and then of course there's white guys and a very prominent Black subject in Minding the Gap. What made you think you could tell those stories?
I don't know if knowing what I know now, I don't know if I would have been as felt as equipped. I think as mentioned with a lot of the other filmmakers, I was learning so much along the way. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing so much of the time. On America to Me, it felt like you created such a rich family of folks that worked on the project. We would meet in your basement and your dog would be slobbering all over us while we're prepping the cameras. And just coming in to drop off cards at Kartemquin or whatever, I could sit down with Rubin and, he's literally watching the footage that I just shot last week. And we're able to talk about well, what do you think about Charles, going through this experience in spoken word or what have you. And so it was, I think America to Me made it easier because it was, there was just other folks to bounce ideas off of throughout the whole process. With Minding the Gap, I think the biggest lesson, it's interesting. I think the thing so Kier is the prominent Black participant in the film. There's a thread about how he feels about being the one Black skateboarder in this primarily white group. And it was the last thread that I felt like we finally figured out how to tell. Because for me, I felt like over the years, I was just being very direct about asking him, what does it feel like to be, the Black skateboarder in this group? And it always felt a little stilted. And then over time, it was almost like he came to this realization that, his dad taught him a bunch of lessons about what it means to grow up Black in America. And, we got a very late pickup interview, a couple of months before picture locking of all these things, and we're able to fit in the edit, and it made it so much more personal. And I think had I been a Black filmmaker, perhaps we would have, landed on something like that revelation much sooner. So I don't know. I think a lot of the lessons I've learned from both those projects is maybe I'm not equipped to tell these stories.
Well, I appreciate that candor. Although, when I look at a film like Minding the Gap and the work you did on America to Me, I see the ways in which you connected to your subjects that aren't just limited to racially, of course. You were a skateboarder. I imagine there weren't a lot of Asian skateboarders in Rockford. Maybe I'm wrong. So maybe you could relate to something about that feeling like you're a little bit of an outsider in a dominant white culture that could help you connect. And the fact that you were a skateboarder certainly built great rapport with the other skateboarders, that that comes through in the film, that you are someone who knows their world and is a part of their world. And I think sometimes, and this, I'm a white filmmaker who's had a long career telling stories about communities of color. And I've been thinking about that a lot in the last couple of years, and what I should do and what I shouldn't do going forward. But I do think that, well, it raises questions about how deterministic we do want to be going forward on this question of who tells what stories. And that doesn't just extend to white filmmakers, it also extends to filmmakers of color too, in the stories that you tell. Reveca, let's pull you into this. Your film that you're working on is a film that is, I think, trying to look at the past and the present, look at artists, well-known artists from the past, and bring those stories into a kind of contemporary relevance. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project and maybe how that relates to this conversation?
Yeah, my project is particularly looking at artists Frida Kahlo, Van Gogh, and Matisse as artists with disabilities from the past, and then connecting them to contemporary artists today with disabilities. And I think, my goal in making this film, I'm also an artist with a disability. I have a spinal cord injury and use a wheelchair. I've been paralyzed for over 20 years. But I think that often the representation of people with disabilities is pretty negative in a lot of media and not accurate. And often there's these tropes of inspiration or of pity, and there really isn't a lot in between that shares what real life is living with the disability experience. And so because I'm an artist, I'm using art as a way to show that experience. It's a human experience, and everyone can, it's an identity that everyone can intersect, with other identities too. Anyone can become disabled really at any point in their lives. And so my hope is to be able to show that, sharing my story and sharing the story of other artists. And like I said, often it's misrepresented, and also in a lot of the work that's happening right now, the DEI work and a lot of inclusion stuff, disability, and is still often forgotten in these diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so it can be quite frustrating to see that. And so I'm happy to have been included today and that we're talking about this.
Great. This is for anybody or all of you. What are ways in which Kartemquin as an institution can do better to deal with the moment we're living in and the change that you guys have eloquently articulated that, going forward in our field around these issues? Or maybe Kartemquin's doing it perfectly. I mean, this is a fundraiser after all. No, they're not. What are some ways? What are some ways in which things could be improved and going forward? Because I know there's certainly a will to do that within the organization. Anybody want to jump on that one?
I'll walk out on a limb and see what happens. Yeah, I mean, I think Kartemquin is definitely having to deal with this reckoning and with its 55-year plus history in the documentary space as a majority white organization. and not just, you know, based on race, like Rebecca said, it's based on ability, it's based on socioeconomic status. Like there's so many other kind of inroads in terms of our identities. And so I think it's important for Kartemquin to continue employing, I hate just saying diverse, but just like a range of creators in actual staff positions, like having folks like Whitney and other people that you can look to inside the organization where you can directly relate to them based on some form of your identity, I think is really important, beyond just feeling that shared identity, but also feeling like there's somebody who can advocate for you in the organization. Because I feel like no matter how many times you may try to verbalize it, sometimes like there's some things that are just misunderstood based on our own experiences. So I definitely think continuing to employ like folks on the staff that can advocate for us. And then I think continuing to cultivate the filmmaker programs, like spaces like DVID are really important for first-time filmmakers of color. It's what kept me motivated to keep going in that first year of production on Unapologetic. But we need to continue that kind of cultivation and space building outside of just that 6-month or 8-month program, so that we can really, you know, feel like we have that community here in Chicago. But, you know, I know it's a heavy load and not a lot of people to pick it up, but I definitely think it's something to be working towards.
That's great. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ashley, and I specifically want to talk about the support to emerging filmmakers. So personally, to me, DVID program is so important. I would say like if it not was like being in DVID, I couldn't have like finished Fanning Ying. And I'm just wondering for Kartemquin, if it's possible, there will be like more long-term like investment in filmmakers. Like for DVID, it's like a 10-month fellowship. I know like it's changing every year, but I'm just wondering if there will be like more opportunity for us, like at least for me, I really want to, you know, learn from other filmmakers. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity that we can collaborate with each other. Like, even though like we know each other as friends, sometimes I just feel like maybe we need like a platform or more opportunities to work together. And also, like Steve, you've done a lot of like great work in the past. I'm wondering if there could be like some more programs to support emerging filmmakers. Maybe as emerging filmmakers of color, maybe we can just learn from you and shadowing you like when you are on production, things like that. So I'm just thinking about, you know, more kind of like long-term programs and the long-term investment in, you know, supporting emerging filmmakers. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think Kartemquin is such a respected name, like in documentary. Like the ways that they can partner with other organizations with resources to help filmmakers of color be able to get opportunities that they might not otherwise get, such as the Hulu accelerator program. Like for me, when I was in DVID, after graduating from the fellowship, I was able to go to Tribeca through Kartemquin, not through applying. And I was able to pitch my film in front of, you know, all the gatekeepers and funders that push my project to the next step. And so, you know, I think Kartemquin can leverage their name in order to continue to foster those bridges for filmmakers to get opportunities through other organizations as well.
What you know, Jenny, you touched on this, and what are ways in which the institution and the filmmakers who have been a part of that institution for longer than you guys have, you know, people like of my generation and even younger than me, because, you know, I'm kind of old, but what are ways in which those folks need to step up or participate in this process? Is it just a matter of handing over the reins, as it were? Or is there more to be done on the part of the associates and people who have been part of building Kartemquin all these 55 years?
Yeah, I think maybe last year we filled out like a survey about how to improve Kartemquin and the collaboration between each others. I remember like the answer I put down was actually, I feel like sometimes there's a disconnect between established filmmakers who's been with Kartemquin for a long time and with like emergent filmmakers, or just filmmakers just step into the field. So I don't have a perfect answer to that, but I'm just thinking if there will be like a program or a platform or database that Kartemquin can lead and can kind of like build a bridge between established filmmakers and emerging filmmakers. Maybe, for those filmmakers who've been with Kartemquin for a long time, they can serve as like a mentor to those young filmmakers. I don't know like what exactly Kartemquin, can realize that, but that might be an idea, could be a direction. Yeah.
I would, if I could add to
Yeah.
everything that's been said, I agree with a lot that's been said. But a lot of it is onus on these filmmakers themselves. Like we can't sit here and provide answers for what they should be doing if they don't want to do the work themselves. It's very much like when we had our reckoning with the George Floyd murder and this talk of finding allies and who's a true ally and who's performative or not, whether that be with institutions or with people. And a lot of times the questions were asked to the Black community, well, what should I as a white person be doing to help bridge the gap? Well, I can't give you the answers, nor should I. A lot of that work has to come from you. And so I would put the onus on these filmmakers to start to look into the mirror and figure it out. It's not our responsibility to kind of give you answers on what to do. You need to do the work yourself. And if you're doing the work yourself, then that will show me at least that your intentions are true and you really do want to kind of bridge this gap and these disconnects that we're talking about. I think it's kind of a shame that we've had maybe, I don't know how many specific classes of the DIVID program that have occurred over the several years, but the fact that I know maybe 10 people from all those classes is kind of a failure of the program. Like we should know everybody in some respect, at least know names of everybody that's kind of been part of that project. And 3 projects from each class shouldn't be the ones that make it out into the world and have their films be seen by some sort of public. The success rate, if you want to call that what it is, sometimes is not that great. And so that's an issue too. That just shows that a lot of projects around the course are not being supported in the same way. I actually was on a shoot a couple of weeks ago, and there was a fellow Black cinematographer on this shoot, and he knew my name, and we got to talking and found out that he was in the DIVID program. I was like, really, And so I think it was maybe 2019, 2020 or what have you, probably not 2020, it's probably 2019. And the fact that we started talking about, the DIVID experience and what it was for us and what we thought it was for some of our comrades in the space as well, just spoke largely to some of the things that I had just mentioned. I shouldn't have met this guy. I shouldn't have met Eric Seals at a shoot and then know that we have this great connection of having been part of the Kartemquin experience, and we didn't know that until then. So at the very least, I would say it's about building this network, reconnecting the people that have been through the DIVID experience, because even if we start to get connected to one another, organically, we're going to start to look out for each other. You know, I've had this project, this Kartemquin Chicago Walmart project, and I've made sure that, you know, I wanted to get some people that were in my Divid class on it, and it's happened. You know, we've been able to get people on that project to work on it. And I think if these connections are meant, like Eric and I, we're going to work together again. Like he's already referred me to things and stuff of that nature. I'm going to refer him. If we ourselves start to have that connection and are able to reconnect with one another, network with one another, we're going to start building, you know, our own table instead of waiting for a seat at the table, you know, and that's sometimes what you have to do in this business.
A lot of great observations there. How would each of you in your own way see yourself as part of redefining what the mission of documentary in the world is today? And if you do, what ways do you see that it needs to be redefined, or what contribution are you hoping to make, or are you making towards that redefinition? I'd love to hear from each of you on this, if possible. Rubin?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think for me, it's just, trying to get that, telling the story, whatever story I'm editing, like the best I can, most authentically. And like, cause I remember this is like, I mean, it happens all the time now, Kartemquin. I email Tim because I get requests from people, oh, I'm looking for a Black editor, and I get all these requests. And I'm like, Tim, I'm the only Black editor y'all know. Like, I'm not complaining, but y'all got to know somebody. Like, there's got to be some database or something, like something, you know. So I started giving some names, like, you know, here's these names, you can refer these people, or I'll just refer them myself, you know, like again, I'm not complaining, but there got to be more people you can go to. So I think certain situations like that, to where it's like, I'm happy people reached out, and I'm happy, you know, my name was given, but at the same time, there need to be a database, there need to be something, you know, for this to be easier to be accessible. And I think just another example, this doesn't have to do with Kartemquin, but the project I'm on now, there's a scene where the main character, she's from New Orleans, and the editor before me was white. And in the scene notes, she says, that's my little libido. That's my little libido. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So I watch it myself, and she says, that's my little baby. That's my little baby. But for him, he got, because of the New Orleans accent, she's Black and she's country, it was just like libido. And I'm like, this, no wonder he can't work with us no more. This doesn't make any sense, you know? So stuff like that, to where it's like, okay, clearly I'm needed, like in certain stuff, to where like, I want to tell this story the best way it can be told. And like you said before, that there's certain stuff, there's certain shorthands, or even like unapologetic, there's certain conversations me and Ashley just never had to have, because we're part of the community, we know the culture, and we just, you know, for us, it just, we didn't never had to have the conversation because we already know. But I think being in those spaces and be able to not only be around white filmmakers that are allowing you in the room, but also allow your voice to be heard and actually listen and paying attention. Yeah, so I think that's, for right now, that's what I would contribute the most, just telling the story the best way I think it should be told based off the character.
Ashley? I'm just calling people out now.
I was like, what I'm thinking is like super radical.
Say it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like my contribution, I'm trying to make white people the minority on all of my crews. And, you know, I think that feels like a heavy shift to a lot of people, but they don't realize that white people have been the dominant identity in documentary for its entire history. And we have had to create space in these spaces for ourselves and advocate for ourselves on a level that is very just very stressful and overbearing sometimes. And as I've been, you know, Unapologetic was kind of a case study, because I didn't know that I was going to hire mostly people of color on that project, but I think it was just kind of like my natural instinct to do so. And as I've been kind of just working as a freelancer in doc spaces, as a DP, the crews where I've been working on projects that are directly related to communities of color that have been like I worked on my first all Black crew for the first time this year, like ever in my history of my career. And I know there's so many other Black filmmakers that will never be able to say that or haven't been able to say that. And I don't think that means that we're diminishing space for white people. I think that just means that we're finally setting down our stake in the system, because it's important that however big or small the story that we're contributing. And I think outside of that, I definitely am also advocating for this kind of relationship with film subjects beyond just I don't like the kind of power over power under kind of relationship I think directors or production teams can have over film subjects. And I think as I've been moving into newer projects after Unapologetic, and understanding like the world outside of production, that it's important to like create these connections and ties with our subjects. Without a camera, it's important to have them feel like they have some sort of, advocacy in the space, or even like a participatory process. I've seen a lot more documentaries start to move towards the model of like asking the subjects what they want or what they would like to be portrayed. And I know it's difficult for us as film directors because we want to maintain that editorial agency, but I don't know if the field should have been built this way in the first place, where we we're always going to have more power because we're the ones that are holding the camera. So I don't think it is asking too much for us to kind of give some of that to our film subjects, and kind of see, what films come out of that.
Great. Yeah. Great observations. Reveca, what about for you?
Yeah, well, I want to go back to something that Kevin said too about us sort of creating our community. And, we do have spaces like the DVID program, we have the accelerator program, but, finding other ways, other entry points for people that, don't make it into these programs or don't get accepted into the programs, like that filmmakers have an opportunity to learn from one another or from more experienced filmmakers. So I just appreciate that Kevin said that. But in terms of my, what I'm sort of focusing on in terms of filmmaking, and like I would like to see accessibility really for everyone, for people with disabilities and without, but I would like that to become like a value and part of the culture of Kartemquin, of other organizations. And I say that in the sense where like it's expected to provide audio descriptions for blind viewers or blind, participants at a film festival or things like that, providing ASL or providing captioning. I would love to see that be the norm rather than an afterthought when people, complete their film and then they're scrambling to figure out, oh, I have to add captions or I have to add audio description. And so like, having grant makers understand that, having program directors understand that, so that it becomes part of line items on budgets, or part of the budget if you're going to have a film festival too, providing ASL, all of that stuff. And accessible spaces, physical, not just, inclusive spaces, but also like physically accessible spaces. And you said we could call out Kartemquin, and I'm going to, because Kartemquin's building is not accessible for wheelchair users. And so for me, being part of the Hulu program, the accelerator program this past year was all virtual, which made it accessible to me. But if it wasn't that way, I would not have been able to get in the building. So I'm calling you out. Sorry. And yeah, and it's something that we're 30 years past the ADA, was passed in 1990. And a lot of times it's still a fight and a struggle just to get these basic things to have access. And I think as filmmakers and the media industry has a lot of power to change that. So we should embrace that.
Yeah, great. I wonder for Jenny and being, I'm going to change the question a little slightly, but feel free to address what I initially asked about redefining. But I'm particularly interested in where documentary needs to go in terms of how it redefines its storytelling around stories of Asian people. You know, for you guys as Asian filmmakers.
I can talk about it. So for me, actually, my answer to your previous question is about media representation. So this is actually a perfect shift. Because I feel like, you know, even within the Asian community, there are so many different groups. You know, you are from, you know, maybe you are from like different countries, and also even within the Chinese communities, there are so many nuances between different groups. So for example, like Bing and I, even though we are all like have like, you know, Chinese face, but our experience are so different for those like first generation or second generation. And for folks just like me, just moved to the US in the past few years, we have very different, I would say like self-identity and also cultural background. But right now, like in media, whenever you talk about like China, Chinese, I think there's a confusion between different groups, and it's actually hurting different communities. And I want to talk about, you know, like last year and even these past few years, the tension between China and the US. And as actually it's hurting a lot of like Chinese Americans in the US. So for my projects, like my previous project, Finding Ying Ying, it's actually trying to, you know, break the stereotype of Chinese international students. And for my future projects, I'm actually working on a project about Chinese American experience. So I think as an Asian filmmaker, as a Chinese, I'm trying to, you know, navigate different groups and really to kind of like educate a general audience about who we are, and to redefine the media representation. Yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with a lot of what Jenny says, and I find myself stumping on the need to disaggregate Asian American data. The fact that it's all lumped into one category for things like public assistance and funding and where resources are allocated is very problematic. You know, one of the biggest wealth disparities is within the Asian American subgroup. You know, I mean, the Southeast Asian refugee experience is very different from, you know, the East Asian experience that's multi-generational in this country. And, you know, I think when it comes to filmmaking, white gatekeepers really need to understand that, you know, you can't just expect an Asian American person to tell any other Asian American story with the same breadth and depth that, you know, somebody from a specific community and a specific background can do. So yeah, I think, you know, in regards to your first question, that's one of the things that I'm interested in, is really complicating the narrative around what the Asian American experience is.
That's great. This kind of leads me to that question, which is, you know, hovers over this whole thing, and it's one that white filmmakers get very, like me, get very nervous about, which is, are we now in a place where white filmmakers should only tell white stories, Black filmmakers should tell Black stories, Asian filmmakers should tell Asian stories? Is that the direction that we need to go? Or do you have feelings about that complicate that for you in any way? Or is that just the way it needs to be? And I ask that as a guy who's made plenty of films about non-white people. So I'm asking it, candidly, honestly. I truly want to know what you think.
I think that I don't think there's a limitation on the types of stories that we get to tell, or we tell as filmmakers of any race. Because much to what both Jenny and Bing were saying, like none of our racial makeups are monoliths. So my experience is not the same as Rubin's as a Black person or as Kevin's as a Black person. And so because of that, I don't think that should necessarily be a hard and fast rule. Like I would like Unapologetic would be a much different story if even a Black man told it as opposed to a Black woman. And even myself as a Black woman, I did not have that direct experience as an organizer in the movement. And so there was a lot of things that I didn't understand about Janae and Bella's experience because that's not something that I had gone through. I think what's a more important question to ask is, not only am I the right person to tell the story, is there another person who this story is more suited to be told by? Because I think that a lot of times we find, or white filmmakers will find, like the smallest connection to a story or to an event and be like, okay, that's like the green light I need to move forward. And really it's like, okay, that may be a piece of it, but are you hiring like people from the community or from this experience onto your team? Are you keeping them involved throughout the entire process? And back to this thing I was saying about this power over relationship that we often have with our film subjects, like needing to make a space for them to have power in this relationship. So I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, because I don't only want to tell Black stories, I mean, I kind of do, but there's other stories that interest me for the rest of my career. And I'm sure, that spreads throughout the space as well. But I do think there's an onus right now on white people to move out of the way for a lot of these marginalized stories, because we haven't even had the chance to ask ourselves, are we the right people to tell these stories, because a white person has already come and swept it up from under us.
Great points. Others on that?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to the environment and the collaboration aspect, because there's been plenty of times where, like American Me, we were all in a room and we all gave our opinions and everything. It wasn't like, oh, Steve, I don't think you never really pulled like a hierarchy card, like I'm director, we're gonna do this. Like it was all like everybody's point, everybody's opinion went into it. I think a lot of times white filmmakers, you can hire a Black person or person of color or this or that person, but it's like, are you even giving them the opportunity to speak or opportunity to hold their opinion, and are you actually taking it in? And so I don't like agreeing with what Ashley's saying. I don't think it necessarily should be like white people only tell white people stories, Black people only tell Black people stories, because even like American Me, you're from that community, but the whole entire show would have been very different if it was only white students. Like I don't even see a universe where we had trouble getting white students anyway. So it would have been like a 2-part series. But so I think it's very different depending on the type of thing. And I remember, I don't think you're gonna remember this, but we were, Jania, the producer, one of the producers of American Me, she had I think it was like a birthday party, and we were at this like obstacle course in the suburbs. And we were talking about American Me ending, and I was like, if you got any future projects, let me know. I could do some assistant editing. And you said something, it was subtle, but I don't think it did a lot for me as far as giving me confidence in being a Black filmmaker, because you were like, no, you don't want to keep assistant editing. You got to like be the editor, like stop saying that. And I was like, yeah, he's right. Like, I gotta stop saying that, I could do more than that, So I think stuff like that and putting confidence when you have those people that are around you and stuff, and giving them the confidence, not just trying to keep them complacent in one spot. Like, no, this person, this filmmaker of color, whoever has aspirations to be doing this, let me help him, put him in a predicament to where he can be doing this and he could learn and he could grow. And not only that, like I can call on you, we can email you for stuff. We've had plenty of conversations that are not just based off filmmaking. And, you know, anytime I've come to you for help, you've been there. So I think having those relationships and those type of opportunities to where I can go to a white filmmaker if I need to, or I could go to this person, you know, I think those are very important and, you know, go a long way.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this question? Or should I just move on?
Yeah, I'll add to that. To go along with what Ruben and Ashley were saying about just the confidence to be able to tell a story about your own community. Like it wasn't until the like going on festival tours with Mind in the Gap that I realized that there was such a hunger for Asian American stories, you know, via audiences constantly asking me like, I want to know more about like your story and your mom's story. I think prior to that, I just felt like I wasn't seeing stories about Asian American narratives. And, you know, I guess it took me making Mind in the Gap to just get the confidence to say like, yes, you know, I think like it is a story worth telling. So yeah, I think there's just something happening in the world right now where people are just starting to get the confidence to be able to say like, yes, I can tell my own story. You know, I can tell a story about my own people, my own community. And that's so empowering to feel.
I think the shift that we need to see happen comes from the gatekeepers and comes from the funding institutions and comes from the streaming partners and whoever's distributing the distribution folks, because there's still this sense of, you know, the established filmmakers who've been around for many years or what have you might be the best to tell X, Y, and Z story, regardless of these questions that we're thinking and talking about and really examining. I have yet to see that from that group of people yet. And that's where the emphasis really needs to be put on those folks to really start to have that, you know, that conversation with themselves and really start to just examine the individual filmmaker, that story that they've told and how well they've told it, and start to embody some of this confidence and trust that Bing and Rubin have discussed in emerging filmmakers, and not always go back to, you know, the folks that have always got it done all the time, because then, yeah, that's where there's no seats at the table that we talked about before, and where, you know, we're ready to try to make our own table.
Yeah, just to touch off what Kevin said real quick, and I think it's going to take a lot of white people, white filmmakers, especially being uncomfortable. Like there's a lot of stuff, like it requires sacrifice at the end of the day. Like if they come to you with a project to say, this is a project based off of community of color or whatever, and they want you to direct it, are you comfortable with saying, I'm not going to direct this unless I could co-direct it with this person that's part of the community? Are you comfortable with turning down that whole thing just to say this and like making a statement? I think a lot of white people in general aren't comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like if you really want to sacrifice, you really want to make change, it's gonna be a few times you're gonna have to be uncomfortable. You're gonna have to sacrifice and really put your, you know, your foot where your mouth is, or your money where your mouth is.
Because what does that sacrifice mean? You know, to them, it's like this fear that they're losing something, that they're missing out, and something's being taken away from them. And that's the racial dilemma, period, in our country, right? So you see that in this field as well, and it's why things aren't moving as fast as we might like them to be.
Yeah, I mean, this has certainly been part of my own thinking, right? The last couple of years, especially, you know, of what stories should I be trying to tell going forward, and if they are stories that involve people of color, how if I feel like I should be involved, how should I be involved? Or whether I should be involved or not. It's, you know, these are pretty profound questions, I think, for all of us. I mean, one thing that Ashley touched on that I would, and she was quite eloquent on it, but I'd love to hear others if others want to speak to it, is the relationship between filmmaker and subject, which, and this whole question of agency and how that needs to evolve. Again, Ashley was great on it, but I'd love if others have other observations about that. That's something that I'd love to hear a bit more on.
Well, I think stepping outside of Kartemquin to make a film like really opened my eyes to how much Kartemquin thinks about ethics in filmmaking and who holds the power. I've realized that most of the industry doesn't necessarily believe in showing the participant the film before it comes out, for example, or in just taking care of the participant after the film comes out and making sure that they are included. And so I think that is a huge. There's a lot of work to be done there, in getting this growing documentary industry to recognize that these are real people's lives, and this film is going to be a part of their lives for the rest of their lives, and we have a responsibility to make sure that they're okay throughout the process and afterwards.
Yeah, and just to touch on what being said, I know there was a time in America to Me where there was a particular student to where I remember Steve saying we have to save her from herself, because if we want to, at the end of the day, these are high school kids, so we don't want to put them in a particular light that people are going to have opinions about them any type of way anyway. But just because this kid is doing this or this kid is doing that, we don't necessarily need to bring all that to the screen, need to bring all that on camera. Like, we could pull some stuff back, or we can make it in a certain way so that they come off kind of different, but it's still their true self. So I think that was a big step for me. And then that same character, we, almost cut out the entire series. And right before Pick Lock, Steve was like, can't do it, feel bad. I don't want to have to write that email to her. I don't have to call her. I don't want to talk to her family. Like, we need to figure out how to make this work for her and our sake. And I think the story would be better, for that. And, of course, as editors, we were like, oh, what are we going to do? But, we made it work. So I think that having that, not necessarily confidence, but having that sensitivity with your subjects and realizing like this is people's lives. And if you've been following a student for an entire year, they're, that's big for them. Like, this high school, I'm gonna be in a documentary, and then just tell them like, oh, sorry, you didn't make the cut. It's like, wait, what? So who knows what that would have done to her if we did, end up cutting her. So I think stuff like that really just taught me how to be sensitive to a subject's need. And, that you unapologetic, we're thinking about making a change right now. So, not to throw a shot at Ashley.
Don't remind me.
I did have one quick question for Steve to put you on the hot seat. What is your answer now to people that say, why are you making, films based off people, with people of color, or, based off people of color?
I'm sorry, I'm the moderator. I don't have to answer any questions. No. Well, it's changed the way I think about telling those stories going forward. So for example, Kevin and I have talked about a potential project that was brought to me. I'm really interested in it. We're not going to say what it is now because we don't even know if it's real, but I'm really interested in it. And I do feel like I am a filmmaker who could tell that story, but I don't feel like I'm a filmmaker that could tell that story by myself as the sole director. And so I talked to Kevin about it, about the idea of co-directing, and co-directing is not something I've ever really, I mean, on America to Me, that was unique, more unique to do that, but that felt vitally necessary and important for the series. In my more individual, just standalone film work, I've never been a particular fan of co-direction, but I've come to realize that that's my problem, and that's one that I need to deal with, and that the storytelling, and I saw this clearly in America to Me, the storytelling the series benefited so profoundly from the directorial contributions of Kevin, Bing, and Reveca, and the editorial contributions of our team, including you, Rubin, that, you know, another way to look at it is you're just going to make better work. It's going to be better work. It's going to be deeper work. And so get over yourself. And so I am changing, you know, I don't know, I couldn't do Hoop Dreams the way I did Hoop Dreams again. I couldn't do The Interrupters the way I did The Interrupters again. If I did those kinds of stories at all, it's going to have to be very differently. And I think a lot of times I'm not going to be doing those stories anymore going forward. That if I can help someone else, like filmmakers like you, if I can play a role in helping you guys tell those stories, I think that's what I need to be doing more. Use my, you know, my clout, if you will. It's hard to think of myself as having clout, but you know, use whatever I have to help, you know, other filmmakers who are in a position to better tell those stories, and who need to be able to tell more stories, need more opportunities to tell more stories.
So the co-direction between you and I will be, you know, you'll be doing the stuff and I'll just be kind of doing this. That's good, Steve. Print it. I'm out. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it.
And that's a model, man. Everybody should replicate that model. That's going forward. We've got it down pat. And
I'll be shooting. I'll be holding the camera too, so that you don't have to do anything. Except
I like that.
But I'm working with both you, Rubin, and Kevin on a current project. And I know that we're all talking about current projects too. So I'll just tell briefly what mine are, and then each of you guys tell. But I've got a Kartemquin project called Joan and Ted, which is about white people. Interesting white people. A guy who many years ago, at the ripe young age of 19, decided to pass secrets to the Soviets from Los Alamos about the bomb, because he worried that the US having the bomb all to itself would be the worst possible thing. So it's a cool story, but I'm also working on another story that's not a Kartemquin film, but this is the one that Kevin and Rubin are working on me with, which is a profile of the basketball player Bill Walton. It's an ESPN project. What are you guys doing? Ashley?
I'm trying to catch up on sleep from this theatrical. So I'm currently developing 2 new projects. One is a docuseries that follows my family patriarch, who raised 17 children from Mobile and Tuskegee, Alabama, many of whom went on to be part of the first wave of the Black middle professional class. So it's exploring his life, movement from the poor rural South to the rest of the US, and what bonds us together as family. Yeah, and then and then another project that I can't talk that much about, but it's based in Indianapolis, where I'm from, and it follows a major event that happened there when I was like 1 year old. So
wow,
yeah,
those sound great. Bing, what are you doing? What are you up to?
I've been developing a few fiction projects, but I don't know. In fiction, I feel like nothing is real ever. So the thing I'm most excited about is I just have been getting back to my roots and going to this parking lot and filming with this skateboarder and like building like kind of like a hybrid fiction project. Yeah.
That sounds cool. Sounds very cool. Jenny?
Yeah, I'm actually developing my second feature, and I've been developing it for a very long time. It's about Chinese American experience, but I don't have like too much detail to share in terms of the story itself. Yeah, that's it.
Or you're worried we're going to try to steal your idea or something? What, you just don't want to tell us? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I think it's like there are some concern in terms of the participants, participants of the film, and
Got
also
it.
yeah, I don't think it's ready to kind of like share it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no,
I've been working on that. Yeah.
totally get that. Totally get that. Rubin?
I'm editing a feature called Commuted, which is about this. Her name is Danielle Metz. She's the wife of the biggest drug lord in New Orleans in the 80s. And when they sentenced him, they gave her the same sentencing. So 3 life sentences plus 20 years. And then she got commuted by Obama after 23 years. She got commuted by Obama. And so, yeah, just telling her story, trying to get reacclimated with her life, her kids, and dealing with that whole thing.
That sounds great too. And Reveca, you told us a bit about your film that you're making right now. You can tell us more about that, or you can tell us about what's going to be next, if you want.
Yeah, well, I actually just completed the demo for that film this week, yesterday. And I'm working on applying for some grants to get some funding for my film. I have not completed a film yet. This is my first film, but this summer I have also been working on developing another film about landscapers, following my my father and family, a lot of family members who have landscaping companies, and following them, and also my younger brother who has a PhD in entomology, and my father retired, and my brother is now taking over his business doing beekeeping and urban gardens. And so I'm sort of figuring out what to do. I want to tell a story about them and about the immigrant experience too.
Oh, that sounds great. Kevin?
I'm finishing up a project that I mentioned earlier. It came through Divid. It's an ITVS co-production called Let the Little Light Shine, a feature-length documentary that looks at a high-performing elementary school here in Chicago that was a beacon for Black children until gentrification threatens its closure. And Steve, you're helping me out on that, being an EP on the project, and we're getting close to being done with it.
Yeah, it's gonna be terrific. I mean, I just want to thank you all for this conversation. It's been terrific. Hearing about your projects, I get very excited about. Those are all films I want to see. I think I want to see Jenny's. I don't know enough yet I'm sure I will want to see it, but they all sound like such rich areas of inquiry for documentaries and or fiction. So it's pretty exciting. Great. What a great collection of folks. Thanks so much, you guys, for doing this, for participating in this. It's great to see everybody. Look forward to actually seeing everybody in person again. I wish we could have done this in person. That would have been a lot of fun. But this was fun too.